Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Dave's Faves. And I'm going to talk about a work that I haven't done as a repertoire survey yet, so you're going to get your first taste of it. It's the Bruch First Violin Concerto. Yeah, in what? It's a G minor, I think. Yeah, it's a G minor thing. I don't know, it's supposed to be. Yes, there it is. A wonderful violin concerto. The only piece by Bruch, aside from the Kol Nidre for cello and orchestra, that anybody seems to care about. Now, Bruch had a very, very long life. You'd be shocked to know that he lived from 1838 to 1920. I mean, he was still around in the 19-teens and 20s. Do you hear about anything he did then? No. And there's a good reason. The reason isn't because he was a bad composer. It was because he was an extremely conservative composer. And he was a very angry composer, too. He was supposed to be just obnoxious, and nobody particularly cared for him. You know, he thought that he was doing everything right and everybody else was doing everything wrong. And he was one of those people. I just can't imagine people like that. You know, I mean, whoever thinks that they're right and everyone else is wrong? Do you know anybody like that? I don't. Can't imagine. Anyway, Bruch's Violin Concerto was so popular that, of course, nothing else that he wrote achieved anything like similar acclaim, and that stuck in his craw as well. In point of fact, he was primarily a composer for choir. He wrote these big German choral works that were kind of the equivalent of those horrible 19th century English oratorio things. And French oratorios, and nothing is more out of fashion than 19th century English or French oratorios. And if you think those are out of fashion, then you have no idea what went on with German oratorios. Oh my gosh, after Mendelssohn's Elijah, there just aren't any that anybody cares about. I mean, even Brahms, you know, he wrote Rinaldo, that cantata. Nobody cares about this repertoire at all. I actually saw a performance of his Die Lorelei. You know, his most famous, I think, was the Song of the Bell, Die Lied der Glocke, or something like that. But I saw Lorelei. Oh, my goodness. No, I didn't see Lorelei. I saw Odysseus. That's what it was. Odysseus. He did Odysseus, believe it or not. It was the dullest thing I've ever heard in my life. Well, possibly it could have been Leon Botstein in the American Symphony's performance. It was a snooze beyond belief. You know, there's one point where Odysseus and his crew run into the sirens. You know, so he's got a little women's choir there, and he actually uses a harp. Oh boy, a harp. Tinkle, 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 twitch, twitch, twitch. Here, little sailors, come here. Oh my God, it was completely ineffective. The whole piece was just a rank bore. And the Violin Concerto is so pretty. It's lovely. And there are a million great performances of it. And, you know, I don't know what to think about Bruch. I've done some talks about his music. I did a talk about a fabulous disc on CPO that has like his Swedish dances and other dance things, which are charming, extremely charming. And the other piece that really is fabulous, actually, I mean, some of you have said you like his symphonies, and a couple of them aren't bad. I don't disagree, mind you. They're derivative, and you know, not terribly interesting in terms of their, you know, adventurousness as symphonies, but they're certainly well made. And some of his chamber music is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. We're going to talk about some of his chamber music. It's extremely beautiful. Really, really well done. But the other piece of his, just to stay on topic, that I think is amazing is the Scottish Fantasia, the Scottish Fantasy, pardon me, is what it usually goes by. The Scottish Fantasy is actually a big four-movement piece that's longer and more substantial than the Violin Concerto, the first Violin Concerto. Remember, there are 3 violin concertos, and they're not bad either. They're not as great as the first. And none of them, I think, are as great as the Scottish Fantasy. It's a fabulous piece of music, and it's all the better because he has a certain folk music idiom that he can draw on to perk up his harmonic interest. And I mean, the tunes are great, of course, and he wrote good tunes, but it was the harmony that was so conservative that usually was his downfall, because he wasn't able to deploy harmony in a way that dramatized his textures and made the melodies so interesting in their context. But in the Scottish Fantasy, he really does, and it's a stunning work. So when I get the first violin concerto, I like to have it coupled with the Scottish Fantasy, not with Mendelssohn or some other violin concerto, which I already have a million copies. And that's why my disc of choice is this one, Kyung-Wha Chung. Boy, was she a great violinist, wasn't she? She gets ignored a lot nowadays because she's not active the way she used to be, but she really had it. She was tremendous. And not only does she do a fabulous recording of the Bruch here on Decca, but the Scottish Fantasy is just as great. And I mean, you know, you've got the Royal Philharmonic and Rudolf Kempe, who was the ultimate chord guy, a fabulous accompanist, a fabulous orchestral coloristic wizard of the podium. So the two of them together make beautiful music. This is the Decca Classic Sound original remastered whatever series. Of course, you can get this in what used to be the big Kyung-Wha Chung box, which no longer exists. But I've seen this on Amazon, actually still available, sometimes with this cover, sometimes with the original cover of the original issue. It was one of her very, very first recordings, and I've loved it from the day I first heard it. I just think it's marvelous. There's not a foot wrong anywhere in it. And the presence of such a fabulous performance of the Scottish Fantasy really makes the disc special, in my view. You can listen to both together. You can listen to either one of them separately, but it's great music, and it's a tribute to Bruch, an underrated composer. Yes, an underrated composer, as long as we don't listen to his oratorios. He really wrote a lot of good music, and I'm going to be talking about more. But in the meantime, this is definitely the version of the violin concerto that I think is most rewarding. I really do. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.